He filed $100 million claim after just 1 month of marriage. People said it was love at first sight. They saw red carpets and perfect smiles. But they never saw the silence behind the doors, the texts left on read, the nights I cried in the dressing room while the world called me lucky. See, when he said, "It's not about money, it's about what you owe me," I realized I had fallen for someone who loved the idea of me, not me. The lawsuit wasn't the real wound. The betrayal was. The way he used my name as a weapon. The way he smiled in court, like love had never existed. I thought fame made you untouchable. But pain doesn't care who you are. And healing begins the moment you stop defending what broke you. This is my story of love, betrayal, and the quiet strength that followed. Julia Roberts and TalksBerry. He walked into the courtroom without even looking at me. No smile, no hesitation. Just that familiar calm he always wore when he was about to destroy something quietly. And when the papers landed on the table in front of me, stamped, signed, cold, I realized what I was looking at. $100 million. That's how much he thought my silence was worth. I wanted to laugh, but my lips wouldn't move, because this wasn't just a lawsuit. This was love turning into war. People think that in Hollywood, heartbreak looks glamorous. Tears behind sunglasses, therapy in Malibu, a glass of white wine by the pool. But no, heartbreak here feels like fluorescent lights, legal jargon, and a man you once kissed now calling you defendant. I remember whispering, "You can't be serious." He didn't answer. He didn't even blink. 1 month, just 1 month after everything I gave up for him, after every promise, every late-night confession, he filed that claim. And the worst part? He knew exactly where it would hurt me most. My reputation, my children, my peace. That's what he wanted to take. Not money, because he had plenty. He wanted control. People around us started to whisper what really happened between them. But no one knew the truth. Not the tabloids. Not the producers. Not even my closest friends. Because the truth wasn't one big explosion. It was small, quiet things. A message left unread. A door closed a second too soon. A trust broken slowly until it collapsed entirely. And as the judge called the session to order, I realized this wasn't just about money or pride. This was a reckoning, a reminder that even the most beautiful love stories can turn into public scandals overnight. And I was about to lose more than I ever imagined. But before that moment, before the cameras, before the courtrooms, we were just us. And it all started with something so simple, a smile that felt like home. It all began in the quietest way, the kind that doesn't look like the start of a storm. A dinner in Los Angeles, somewhere between work obligations and curiosity. I wasn't looking for anyone. Honestly, I thought that part of my life was complete. I'd loved, lost, healed, built a world around my children and my work. And yet that night, the air felt different. He walked in late, not in a way that annoyed you, but in a way that made time slow down for a second. He had that disarming confidence, the kind that people in this city wear like perfume, but there was something quieter about him, something observant. He wasn't an actor, though everyone assumed he was. He was a producer, the kind who liked to stay behind the curtain, shaping things no one ever saw but everyone felt. He carried himself like someone who'd seen both success and loneliness, and learned to make peace with both. When we were introduced, he said, "Julia Roberts. I grew up watching you save everyone on screen. Never thought I'd see you sitting next to me." I laughed, maybe too nervously. Well, in real life, I don't do much saving. These days, I'm just trying to keep the coffee warm. It was small talk, but it didn't feel small. It felt like recognition. Over the next few weeks, we ran into each other again. Charity events, studio dinners, a coffee shop that seemed too coincidental. Every time he'd make me laugh. Every time I'd catch myself waiting for the next one. When he asked me to dinner, I said yes before I could think of a reason to say no. And that night, under dim restaurant lights, surrounded by the hum of quiet conversations, I realized how long it had been since I'd felt seen. He didn't ask about fame or roles or the industry. He asked about me. About the books I read. About what made me walk away from projects. About what I was afraid of when the cameras stopped rolling. There was a gentleness to him that disarmed me. A softness that made me think maybe, just maybe, there was still room for something real in a world built on illusion. Within weeks, we were inseparable. We cooked together, laughed about nothing, took long drives along the coast. He'd always say, "You know what I love most about you? You still blush when I compliment you." And I'd roll my eyes, pretending it didn't make my heart race. He met my kids, slowly, respectfully. He didn't try to be anyone he wasn't. He'd bring small gifts, tell them stories about film sets and airplanes, and make them laugh. And for the first time in years, I let someone into that sacred circle. It felt safe. It felt like home. The tabloids eventually caught on. Julia's new flame, the mystery man beside America's sweetheart. I ignored the noise. For once, I wanted to live my life without hiding it. We spent nights at my ranch, away from Los Angeles, where stars actually looked like stars again. He'd build a fire, pour wine, and talk about making a film together one day. A story about real love, the kind that survives everything. He said it like a promise. I believed him, but love in our world comes with a price tag, and everyone wants a piece. The more we appeared together, the more the industry whispered. Rumors about jealousy, projects lost, partnerships ruined. None of it mattered to me, though. I told myself love was stronger than gossip. One evening, after a long shoot, I came home to find him sitting on the porch, staring into the distance. Something in his eyes looked off. I asked, "Long day?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just thinking." "About what?" He paused. "About how fast things change in this town. One minute you're trusted, the next you're a headline." I walked closer, brushing my hand against his shoulder. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone." He nodded but said nothing. I didn't know it then. That moment was the first crack. Tiny, almost invisible, but it was there. A few weeks later, he asked if I'd help him produce a small project. An emotional film about fame and family. I loved the script. It felt raw, honest, something that deserved to be made. We agreed to co-produce, and soon our personal and professional lives began to intertwine completely. We shared meetings, emails, decisions, everything. And for a while it felt perfect. But perfection is fragile, and when money and trust meet in Hollywood, they never stay friends for long. The first argument was small. A creative disagreement over casting. He wanted someone he'd worked with before. I had another actress in mind. He said I wasn't trusting his instincts. I said he was taking it too personally. The silence afterward was heavier than the words we didn't say. That night, I replayed the moment in my head, over and over, trying to find where it went wrong. He apologized the next morning, holding coffee and saying, "I don't want to fight with you. Not over something stupid." I smiled, believing it was behind us. But something changed. Calls got shorter, texts delayed. A tone I couldn't name started to grow between us. He began working late, and when I'd ask, he'd say, "Just meetings. You know how it is." I wanted to believe him. But I also knew the industry, and I knew when someone was hiding something. Still, I told myself it was stress, pressure from the project, attention from the press. I didn't want to become paranoid. I didn't want to lose what we had. One night, after wrapping up a long day, I checked my phone and saw a notification I wasn't supposed to see. A message from someone I didn't know. Her name was saved only as Kay. The text read, "He told me you're in the dark. Be careful, Julia." I stared at it for minutes. I couldn't breathe. The restaurant laughter, the warm light, the quiet dinners, all of it blurred into a cold silence. When he came home, I didn't confront him right away. I watched him instead. The way he avoided my eyes. The way he poured his drink without asking me how my day was. Everything suddenly looked different. That night, while he slept, I opened his laptop. A folder labeled production drafts. Inside, not scripts, contracts, agreements, emails. My name was in them. So was his. And an amount I'd never seen before. $100 million. I didn't understand at first. But I felt it. That rush of fear and disbelief. The project wasn't just ours. He had filed the company solely under his name, using my image, my name, and our joint concept to secure investors. Without telling me, the man who once called me his muse had turned me into his business model. I sat there staring at the screen, trying to reconcile the two versions of him, the one who made me feel safe, and the one who was about to betray everything we built. When he stirred in his sleep, I closed the laptop and walked outside. The air was cold, the sky heavy with silence. That's when I realized I wasn't living in love anymore. I was living in a lie. And sooner or later, it was going to explode. I didn't confront him that night. I couldn't. My hands were trembling, my heart thudding like a warning drum inside my chest. I told myself maybe there was an explanation. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was just paperwork, legal formatting, something technical. That's what we tell ourselves when we don't want to see the truth. But deep down, I knew. I knew something was changing between us. The next morning, sunlight hit the kitchen counter, painting everything golden, but nothing felt warm. He was already dressed, already busy, typing away on his phone. I forced a smile. "You're up early." He didn't look up. "Yeah, big day." "Investor call." Investor. The word burned. I wanted to say, "The same investors who think I'm your silent partner?" But instead I just nodded. He kissed my cheek absently, a gesture that used to make me feel safe, and said, "Don't wait up tonight." And just like that, he was gone. The silence left behind was too loud. I sat at the table watching his untouched coffee grow cold. And that's when the message came. Unknown number. No name. Just one line. "You deserve to know what he's doing." Attached was a document. A scanned page. The letterhead read Pacific Crest Productions. My name appeared halfway down, not as co-producer, not as partner, but as marketing asset. My pulse stopped. That was the word he used for me. An asset. For the next few days, I pretended. I smiled through interviews, through photo shoots, through everything that demanded the illusion of Julia Roberts, the calm, composed woman the world expected me to be. But inside, I was unraveling. Every sound felt sharp. Every silence suspicious. When he'd text, I'd read between the lines. When he'd smile, I'd wonder what it was hiding. Trust is like glass. Once cracked, it reflects everything wrong before it finally breaks. And I knew the break was coming. One evening, after a premiere event, we drove home in near silence. The city lights blurred past. Red, white, gold. And I couldn't tell if it was the traffic or my heartbeat that felt so chaotic. He looked distracted, his jaw tight, fingers drumming the steering wheel. I finally said it. "Who is Kay?" He froze for a second. "What?" I repeated softly. "The person who texted me. She said you told her I was in the dark." He laughed, too quickly. "Julia, come on. You really believe some random message? Then show me your phone." The air turned still. He looked at me, not with anger, but with disappointment, as if I had done something wrong. "After everything, you think I'd lie to you?" he said. I didn't answer, because the truth was I didn't know anymore. He sighed, pulled over, turned off the engine. The street light outside flickered against his face, carving shadows across his features. "I don't know who sent that," he said, calmer now. "But if you can't trust me, what's left of us?" He reached for my hand, but I couldn't move. I wanted to believe him. I did. But belief without proof is just denial. The next week, the first tabloid headline dropped. Inside Julia Roberts' secret 100 memoir film deal. Trouble in Paradise? I remember staring at my phone. The photo of us smiling on a red carpet beside words like greed and lawsuit. He came into the room moments later, reading the same headline. "Who leaked this?" I asked. He said nothing. I pressed again. "Who benefits from this going public?" That's when his expression changed. Subtle, but unmistakable. A flicker of guilt. And I knew. The argument that followed wasn't loud. It was worse. Quiet. Cold. Icy words that cut deeper because they were controlled. He said I didn't understand business. I said he didn't understand love. He said I was naive. That fame made me blind to reality. I said he was selfish. That greed made him blind to decency. We stood in opposite corners of our home, both claiming to be right. Both already knowing something sacred had been broken. He finally whispered, "You think you're the victim here? Julia, but you're not." And walked out. That night I cried for hours. Not out of anger, but out of disbelief. Because the man who once looked at me like I was his piece now looked at me like I was his enemy. Days turned into weeks. We stopped talking except through lawyers and production assistants. Our shared project, once our dream, turned into a battlefield. Emails from studios started coming to me directly. Some hinted they might withdraw funding due to creative conflict. Others asked if I wanted to remove my association to avoid negative publicity. It was humiliating. Every whisper in every meeting carried my name, tied to words like lawsuit, conflict, collapse. My publicist tried to protect me, but even she couldn't hide her worry. "Julia," she said quietly one afternoon, "whatever's happening, you need to get ahead of it before he does." But I didn't want to fight. I wanted to understand. I wanted him to explain why. So one night I went to him. No cameras. No lawyers, just me. He opened the door, surprised. "Julia," he said, voice low. "It's late." "I know, I need to know why." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he poured himself a drink, sat down, and stared at the floor. Finally, he said, "You think I wanted it this way?" "Then why?" I asked. "Because every time we walked into a room together, they looked at you." "What?" "They never saw me, Julia. I was the man next to you, the producer behind her project, the shadow beside the spotlight." His words hit like a slow bruise. He wasn't angry at betrayal. He was angry at invisibility. "So you decided to punish me?" I whispered. He didn't look up. He just said, "I needed to prove I could stand without your name attached." Silence. I could feel my throat closing. "That's not love," I said softly. "That's competition." He exhaled, rubbing his temples. "You don't understand. In this world, love isn't enough. It's survival." I left before he could finish. After that night, everything accelerated. He cut contact with mutual friends. Meetings were rescheduled without me. And then, the legal notice. A thick white envelope with my name in black ink. Inside, an official claim. He was suing me for $100 million. The reason? Breach of verbal agreement. Unauthorized use of intellectual property. Emotional distress. It didn't even make sense. I stared at the document, the words swimming on the page. My lawyer read it twice, then looked up at me. "Julia, this isn't about money." "I know," I whispered. "It's about power." The next few weeks were a blur of headlines, statements, and heartbreak. Old friends stopped calling. Reporters parked outside my home. I couldn't go anywhere without hearing my own name twisted into rumors. But the worst part wasn't the noise. It was the silence inside me. The silence of realizing the man I trusted had turned me into a headline. That love, the kind I thought could heal old wounds, had instead reopened them. At night, I'd lie awake replaying everything. The dinners, the laughter, the warmth. And I'd ask myself the same question. When did love turn into strategy? I stopped eating, stopped reading scripts. Even my children noticed. "Mom," one of them said, "you don't smile anymore." That's when I knew I had to fight, not for money but for truth. Because if I didn't, the story would belong to him. The day before the first court hearing, I stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized myself. My eyes were tired. My voice was gone. But somewhere beneath it all, there was still a spark. The part of me that had survived worse storms. I whispered to my reflection, "You've played strong women your whole life. Now it's time to be one." And when I walked into that courtroom the next morning, the one I described at the start of the story, I didn't go there as an actress. I went there as a woman reclaiming her dignity. But what happened inside that courtroom, what I discovered next, was worse than anything I could have imagined. Because sometimes betrayal doesn't end with lies. It ends with truths you were never supposed to know. The courtroom smelled like polished wood and quiet tension. Reporters filled the benches behind me, whispering like vultures circling the last breath of a dying story. But this wasn't a story. This was my life. He sat just a few feet away, the man I once called my safe place. Now he wouldn't even look at me. His lawyers whispered in his ear, handing him papers I knew were designed to hurt. My attorney leaned closer and murmured, "Stay calm, Julia. Let them go first." I nodded, though I wasn't sure I could. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. The air thickened, and all I could hear was the sound of my heartbeat. Slow, deliberate, terrified. Then his lawyer stood up, all confidence and polish, and began. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "this is a case about deception, about trust violated in both personal and professional capacity." Each word was a dagger, carefully sharpened. He continued, my client entered a verbal and financial partnership with Ms. Roberts on a joint production project. However, Ms. Roberts acted in bad faith, using his creative material, defaming his reputation, and withholding financial compensation exceeding $100 million. I froze. Defaming his reputation? I hadn't even spoken about him publicly. I'd been silent. Too silent. But the way he looked at me, as if I was just another name on a list of people who had wronged him, broke something deep inside me. The first witness was called. It was someone I knew, a mutual producer friend. When he walked in, he couldn't meet my eyes. He testified that my partner had created the original concept, that I'd attached my name for publicity. I felt like the floor was slipping beneath me. My lawyer objected, but it didn't matter. The seed was planted. The press would twist it before the sun went down. By lunchtime, the whispers online began. Julia Roberts accused of sabotaging ex-partner's project. 100 claim reveals ugly truth behind the scenes. The headlines wrote the script faster than I could live it. That night after the first hearing, I went home alone. The cameras followed me all the way to the gate. Flashes, voices, chaos. But once the door closed, there was nothing. Just silence. I sank onto the floor, still in my courtroom clothes, and stared at the wall. There are moments when pain feels too big to cry about. It just sits inside you, heavy, pulsing, suffocating. I was living that kind of pain. For the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to lose yourself without dying. A few days later, my lawyer called me urgently. Julia, you need to come in now. When I arrived, she was holding a folder. Her face was pale. She said, he filed new evidence. I took the folder, opened it, and saw my emails. Private ones. Messages between me and my children. Between me and friends. Even notes from therapy. I felt the blood drain from my face. How did he get these? She looked at me quietly. We believe he hacked your account. I couldn't breathe. He's going to use this? She nodded. To prove you were emotionally unstable during production, that you caused delays, that you sabotaged him. My hands shook. That's not just invasion of privacy. That's cruelty. She sighed. Julia, this case stopped being about truth the day it was filed. It's about humiliation now. That night I couldn't sleep. Every email replayed in my head, things I'd written in pain, in vulnerability, now turned into ammunition. He wasn't just suing me. He was dissecting me. I remembered the first time I ever told him something personal, a memory from my childhood, something I'd never shared publicly. He'd said, you can trust me. Your secrets are safe with me. Now those same words echoed like a curse. I wanted to call him, to scream, to ask why, but I didn't. Because deep down, I knew his silence would hurt more than any answer. Weeks passed. Each court session chipped away another piece of my faith. He presented documents, recordings, edited messages, all twisted, all designed to rewrite history. The man I once loved was now constructing a version of me I didn't recognize. And the world was starting to believe it. Fans who once sent me flowers now sent letters asking if I'd really done it. Colleagues distanced themselves politely. Even close friends didn't know what to say anymore. That's the cruelty of public pain. It isolates you. One morning, I arrived at the courthouse and noticed a familiar figure standing by the doors. It was Kay, the woman who had texted me. She looked nervous, glancing around like she wasn't supposed to be there. When our eyes met, she approached quickly. I shouldn't be talking to you, she whispered. I said, who are you? She hesitated, then said quietly, I used to work for him. I saw the contracts, the fake signatures, the accounts. I felt my heart stop. You're saying he... She cut me off. He set this up, Julia. The lawsuit. The headlines. Everything. It's not about justice, it's revenge. My throat tightened. Why are you telling me this? Because I couldn't watch him do it again. Before I could ask what she meant, a car pulled up. A man got out, his assistant. She stepped back instantly. Be careful, she said. He's not finished yet. And she was gone. That night, I sat alone on my porch, holding a glass of untouched wine. The city lights below looked blurry, not from distance, but from tears. Everything she said replayed in my head. The fake contracts, the setup, the manipulation. I wanted to tell the world, to scream the truth. But every time I tried, I realized people believe what they want to believe. And in Hollywood, a broken woman is easier to sell than an honest one. So I did what I had to. I prepared to fight. The next day in court, my lawyer submitted a motion to investigate financial fraud. The room went still. His side objected instantly, voices rising. The judge allowed a review. For the first time, he looked afraid. And that's when I saw it. The flicker of guilt in his eyes. It wasn't much, but it was real. He avoided my gaze the rest of the day. Later, outside the courthouse, he finally spoke to me for the first time in months. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "Doing what?" I said quietly. "Trying to ruin me?" I almost laughed at the absurdity. "Ruin you? You took my name, my work, my trust, and now my peace. What else is there to take?" He didn't answer. His silence was an admission. That night, I sat in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling hollow. I realized something painfully clear. This wasn't about love or justice. It was about his need to control the narrative. He couldn't stand that I had the power to walk away quietly. He needed to win. And somewhere between love and vengeance, he'd lost himself and dragged me down with him. When the financial review came back weeks later, it confirmed what Kay had hinted at. Fake invoices, hidden transfers, altered contracts, everything. My lawyer looked at me and whispered, "We can end this." But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like standing in the ruins of something beautiful, knowing the storm had finally passed. But so had everything you loved. The court dismissed his claim. His reputation crumbled overnight. Reporters shifted their tone, now calling him manipulative, calculating, a cautionary tale. But I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt empty. Because the truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes it just leaves you alone with your scars. A week after the final hearing, I found a letter on my doorstep. No return address. Just my name in his handwriting. Inside, "You were right. I didn't want to win. I just didn't want to lose you." No apology, no admission. Just a line soaked in regret. I folded it, placed it in a drawer, and never looked at it again. That was the day I stopped waiting for closure. Because sometimes there is none. Sometimes the wound becomes the lesson. And mine was this. Even love, the kind that feels divine, can turn into destruction when built on ego. But healing wasn't instant. It never is. There were nights I'd wake up expecting his voice, his hand, his warmth, and then remember that all of it had turned into legal evidence. Love letters turned into exhibits. Memories turned into proof. And in that cruel transformation, I realized I had lost not just him, but a version of myself that believed love could save everything. It took months before I could step outside without flinching at camera flashes. Months before laughter sounded real again. But eventually I did. And slowly, painfully, I began to breathe again. The night I discovered the truth, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even loud. It was quiet. Too quiet. Like the silence that comes right before the ocean pulls back for a wave, you can't escape. He had gone to New York for meetings. That's what he said. But something in his voice had changed. There was distance. A kind of hesitation that sounded like guilt dressed as exhaustion. I told myself not to spiral. But then his assistant, someone I had known for years, accidentally forwarded me the wrong file. It wasn't about his project. It was about me. I remember sitting at my kitchen island, the screen glowing blue in the dark. There it was, a series of legal drafts, agreements, and confidentiality clauses, all carrying my name, all prepared weeks before he filed the claim. I scrolled slowly, trying to understand, but every line blurred together. Misrepresentation, emotional damages, breach of trust. It was like reading my own obituary, written in legal terms. And then I saw her name, Lisa, the young producer I had introduced him to. The one he'd called a creative genius. The one who had started joining his meetings for mentorship. Her signature sat at the bottom of one of the documents, as a witness. My breath caught in my throat. I set the laptop aside, walked to the sink, and ran the tap. The water was too cold, but I let it run over my shaking hands anyway. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't a mistake. This was planned. Every call he missed, every fight that ended with silence, every time he said, "You're too emotional for this industry." He was building his exit while I was still holding on. I sat there all night, staring at the window reflection of a woman I barely recognized. Eyes swollen, hair messy, wearing his old shirt like some cruel reminder. At dawn, I called him. He didn't answer. But a few hours later, he showed up, calm, polished, coffee in hand. Like nothing had happened. "Julia," he said softly, setting his phone on the counter. "We need to talk." My voice cracked. "When were you going to tell me?" He blinked, confused. "Tell you what?" I turned the laptop toward him. He froze just for a second. Then he smiled. That smile. The one that used to make me believe in forever. Now it just looked hollow. "You weren't supposed to see that yet," he said quietly. "Yet?" I repeated. He sighed, running his fingers through his hair. "Julia, you know how this business works. There's money, image, timing. I was trying to protect both of us." I laughed, but it came out broken. "By suing me?" He looked at me then, really looked at me. And for the first time, I saw guilt flicker behind his eyes. "This isn't about hate," he whispered. "It's about control. You're unpredictable when you're hurt. I couldn't risk what you might say." I stepped back. "You mean you couldn't risk the truth?" He didn't answer. The silence between us felt like glass, fragile, sharp, and one word away from shattering. "Did you ever love me?" I asked finally. He hesitated, then said something that would haunt me for years. "I loved what we looked like." That was it. No explanation. No apology. Just the truth, raw and cruel. Something inside me went completely still. Not angry, not sad, just empty. He left a few minutes later, leaving his coffee cup on the counter, still warm. And that's how it ended. Not with a scream, not with closure, but with silence. That night, I went to the balcony, watching Los Angeles lights flicker like broken promises. And for the first time in months, I didn't cry. I just stood there realizing that love, real love, should never feel like walking through a minefield. The lawsuit would still come. The headlines. The rumors. The interviews. But deep down, I already knew. The real betrayal wasn't in the courtroom. It was in the quiet moments, when the person you love starts seeing you as a liability instead of a heartbeat. And from that night on, I swore I'd never let anyone turn my kindness into currency again. The first morning after he left, I woke up expecting to hear his voice. It's strange how the body remembers sound. The rustle of someone's jacket, the click of their coffee mug, the way they breathe when they're thinking. But the house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't heal you. It just reminds you what you've lost. I made 2 cups of coffee out of habit, then poured one down the sink. That's how grief begins. Not with tears, but with small mistakes, making breakfast for someone who isn't coming home. The news broke 3 days later. Julia Roberts sued in a $100 million claim. Shocking betrayal unfolds. My face was everywhere again. But this time it wasn't for a movie. It was for my heartbreak. The irony stung. How people love to watch my characters fall apart on screen. But now they were watching me. No script, no direction. Just real pain. I turned off my phone, closed the blinds, let the world spin without me for a while. In that silence, I started to see the pieces of myself I had lost in him. The way I'd apologized too quickly, the way I'd smiled to keep peace, the way I'd mistaken manipulation for love because it came with gentle hands. When you love someone like that and deeply, blindly, you forget that love isn't supposed to cost you your sense of self. And that's what I realized too late. I had paid for his comfort with my own identity. A friend came by one afternoon, no cameras, no makeup, just kindness. She sat beside me and said softly, "Julia, you don't have to prove anything anymore. You've already survived worse." And maybe she was right. Because the truth is, I had been here before. Not in a courtroom, but in heartbreak. The kind of heartbreak that teaches you who you are when no one is clapping. I started journaling again. Every night I wrote one page, not about him, but about me. What I liked, what I missed, what I wanted to feel again. At first, the words came out bitter, then softer, then stronger. I realized that healing doesn't look like sunshine and therapy sessions. It looks like sitting in a dark room, forgiving yourself for staying too long. One night, I found an old photo, the two of us on set laughing. For a moment, I missed that version of us. Not the lies, not the control, but the laughter. Then I realized something profound. I wasn't missing him. I was missing me, the woman I used to be when I believed love was safe. That was my turning point, not when he left, but when I decided to stop needing answers. I didn't need closure. I needed peace. So I began small rituals. A walk at sunrise, reading poetry instead of emails, cooking dinner for myself, not just eating to pass time. Each act felt like reclaiming a piece of my spirit he'd borrowed, but never deserved. Weeks passed. The lawsuit dragged on, but I stopped reacting. He could have the headlines, the gossip, the noise. I was busy rebuilding silence into sanctuary. One evening, as rain tapped against the windows, I whispered out loud, "Maybe this isn't punishment. Maybe it's protection." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. Because sometimes the universe doesn't break your heart to destroy you. It breaks your heart to wake you up. I had spent years learning how to play characters who found their happy endings. But this time I wasn't acting. This was real, raw, unscripted, and in that rawness, I found something purer than any role I'd ever played. Truth. The truth that I didn't need him to define my worth. The truth that love shouldn't make you question your sanity. The truth that silence can be sacred if you stop fearing it. I stopped waiting for an apology that would never come. I stopped replaying our conversations like broken film reels. Instead, I started writing new ones and with myself. And though the world still called it a scandal, to me it had become a rebirth. A quiet, imperfect, beautifully painful rebirth. It's strange how peace sneaks in. It doesn't arrive with trumpets or epiphanies. It shows up quietly, in the morning light that touches your face after a long night of tears, or the sound of your own laughter returning after you thought it was gone forever. For me, peace began on a Tuesday. Nothing special about that day. No lawyers, no cameras, no drama. Just me, a cup of chamomile tea, and the sound of my dog snoring at my feet. I realized the storm had finally passed. Not because the lawsuit was over, it wasn't. But because it no longer owned me. I started walking again every evening before sunset. No destination, no disguise, no bodyguards. Just the rhythm of my footsteps and the quiet hum of Los Angeles fading into dusk. Sometimes people would recognize me and smile, but they didn't see a headline anymore. They saw a woman simply existing. One day, I passed by a small art studio tucked behind a coffee shop. A handwritten sign in the window read, "Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without breaking." Something about that line stopped me cold. I stood there for a long time, reading it over and over. Then I walked inside. The room smelled like oil paint and rain-soaked wood. A young woman was painting, soft strokes, slow rhythm. She looked up and smiled gently. "Would you like to join?" she asked. So I did. I hadn't touched a paintbrush in years, but the colors felt alive in my hands. I didn't paint faces or memories. I painted feelings. Golden light for acceptance. Deep blue for regret. Soft gray for all the things I couldn't explain. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I felt free. Healing doesn't erase what happened. It just changes the way it lives inside you. I stopped trying to understand his betrayal. Some people break things they don't know how to love. And sometimes, love itself becomes a mirror, showing you who someone is when no one's watching. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at him. Not even at myself. I just understood. He came back once, months later. Not for love, not for forgiveness. For closure, maybe. We met at a quiet restaurant on the coast. No press, no entourage. Just two people who had once believed in forever. He looked older. Tired, maybe. He said, "You look peaceful." I smiled softly. "I am." He nodded. eyes searching mine for a trace of the woman who used to wait for his calls. But she was gone. In her place stood someone steadier, quieter, unshakable. He tried to explain about fear, pressure, mistakes. But I didn't need explanations. Not anymore. "Do you hate me?" he finally asked. I took a breath and looked at the waves behind him, the way the sun melted into the horizon. "No," I said quietly. "I just don't believe in you anymore." And that was the truest thing I'd ever said. When I left the restaurant, I didn't cry. I didn't look back. I just walked toward the sound of the sea, letting the wind carry away whatever was left of us. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in months. No dreams, no replaying the past, just stillness. The next morning, I called my lawyer and said, "Settle it. Whatever it takes, I'm done fighting." He hesitated, but I meant it. Because peace was worth more than any amount of money. A few weeks later, it was over. The lawsuit, the headlines, the noise, all of it. And what remained was something beautiful, simplicity. The kind you forget exists when your life becomes too big, too public, too loud. I spent my evenings cooking again, barefoot, music playing softly. I invited old friends over, the ones who loved me before the fame, before the glitter. We laughed until our stomachs hurt. We told stories about the past, the good parts, the silly ones. I realized that healing isn't a destination. It's a rhythm you learn to dance with. Some days you stumble, other days you glide. But eventually you find balance. And one afternoon, as I watched the sunset paint the sky in gold and violet, I whispered to myself, I made it. Not as Julia Roberts, the actress, but as Julia, the woman who lost everything and still found herself again. Because the greatest comeback isn't in your career or your image. It's in your heart. When you can look at the person who broke you and feel nothing but calm, that's freedom. And that freedom, it's worth more than $100 million. It's strange how life circles back when you least expect it. Months had passed since the lawsuit ended, but one evening, while the city outside hummed softly beneath a pink and gold sunset, I found myself thinking, not about him, but about me. I was sitting by the window, tea in hand, barefoot. The same house that once felt haunted, by echoes of our arguments now filled, with nothing but warmth. The silence didn't hurt anymore. It soothed me. I realized then that peace isn't the absence of pain. It's learning how to live with it without letting it define you. There was a time when I thought I'd never trust again, that every smile would hide an agenda. Every touch would carry a warning. But hearts, they're stubborn things. They keep hoping, even when they've been shattered. I began to let the world back in slowly. Little by little, an old director called me, offering a role in a small, independent film. He said, "Julia, it's not about glamour, it's about truth." And something in me stirred. For the first time in a long while, I said yes. The story was quiet, about a woman learning to forgive herself. There were no red carpets, no flashing lights, just a simple script that felt eerily close to my own life. On the first day of shooting, standing in front of the camera again, I felt a rush of emotion. Not fear, gratitude, because I wasn't performing this time. I was living. Every line I delivered came from a place deeper than acting. It came from survival. When the scene ended, the crew clapped softly. I smiled, tears in my eyes, whispering to myself, I'm home. That moment taught me something. We don't heal to become who we were. We heal to become someone new, someone wiser, calmer, freer. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. Not to him. Not to the world. Not even to myself. My worth had never been in headlines or paychecks. It was in my resilience, in the way I kept loving, even when life tried to harden me. One afternoon, I visited the art studio again, the one that had saved me in silence. The same woman who first handed me a brush was there. She smiled when she saw me. I remember you, she said. You were painting storms. I laughed. I think I'm painting sunlight now. She looked at me thoughtfully and replied, Then maybe you finally learned what light really means. That night, driving home, the city lights blurred like stars through my windshield. And I realized he wasn't the villain in my story anymore. He was just a chapter, a necessary chapter that taught me how to rebuild my own ending. We spend so much time wanting justice, closure, answers. But sometimes the only real closure is peace. And peace doesn't come from them. It comes from you deciding the story ends differently this time. I thought about love, what it used to mean, what it means now. And I smiled. Love, I've learned, isn't about never being hurt. It's about surviving it and still choosing kindness. Still believing that people and life can be good again. Maybe that's what growing up truly is. Realizing that not everyone who hurts you is evil. Some are just broken. And broken people break others until they learn to face their own cracks. But I'm no longer responsible for fixing anyone. Not him. Not anyone else. Now I just love gently, starting with myself. And as I sit here tonight, the world quiet outside my window, I know something for certain. I lost a man who didn't see me, but I found a woman who finally does. The woman I was meant to become all along. Sometimes I think about everything that happened. The love, the chaos, the lawsuit, the silence that followed. And I realize it all led me here. To this version of myself, quieter, softer, but stronger. A woman who no longer measures her worth by who stays or who leaves. A woman who finally understands that peace is not given by others. It's created within. If you've ever been through heartbreak that made you question who you are, please know you're not alone. Pain can make you believe that something is wrong with you. But sometimes, it's not that you're too much. It's that you were giving your heart to someone who couldn't hold it. There's a kind of beauty in loss, even if it doesn't feel that way at first. Because every time your heart breaks, it makes space for something truer, something gentler, something more you. I don't hate him. I don't even resent what he did. Because in breaking me, he unknowingly handed me back to myself. I used to think love meant holding on no matter what. Now I know real love doesn't chain you. It frees you. And if anyone listening right now feels like their world is falling apart, maybe it's just falling into place. Time has a strange way of revealing what was meant for you and what was never supposed to stay. So wherever you are tonight, if you're sitting in your own silence wondering how to start again, start small. Start with yourself. You don't need revenge. You don't need to win. You just need peace, and it will come. One breath, one sunrise, one soft step at a time. Because if I learned anything from this, it's that no matter how public your pain becomes, healing will always be a private, sacred act. And when you finally choose yourself, life quietly begins again. Thank you for listening to my story, for feeling it with me, for staying until the end. If this journey touched your heart, please subscribe to TalksBerry and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice, your presence, your empathy, they mean more than you know. Because every story we tell here reminds someone out there that healing is still possible, even after the loudest heartbreak. So from my heart to yours, thank you for watching. And remember, you can survive anything, as long as you don't stop believing in yourself. Julia Roberts.